Chosen one. God gave you the hardest test, and you made it through. There are moments in life when pain becomes so deep that words can no longer explain it. Moments when silence feels heavier than noise. Moments when you look around and wonder why your journey has been harder than everyone else's. Why you had to lose people you loved. Why betrayal followed you. Why doors kept closing in your face, while others seemed to walk easily toward their blessings. If you are listening to this message today, understand something powerful. Your suffering was never meaningless. Your battles were not random, and your survival was not luck. You were chosen for a test that very few souls could endure. The weight you carried would have destroyed many people, but somehow, despite every scar, every tear, every sleepless night, you are still standing. That alone is proof that heaven has been sustaining you all along. The truth is that chosen people are not selected because life will be easy for them. They are selected because they possess a spiritual strength they themselves often do not fully recognize. God allows difficult battles only for those capable of carrying extraordinary destinies. Ordinary paths create ordinary people. But uncommon destinies are born through fire, pressure, isolation, and spiritual warfare. The very things that almost broke you were also shaping you into someone different from the world around you. Every rejection strengthened your discernment. Every betrayal sharpened your wisdom. Every lonely season forced you to depend on God instead of human validation. What looked like punishment was actually preparation. There were times when you thought God had abandoned you, times when prayers seemed unanswered, times when you cried in silence while nobody understood the war happening inside your soul. Yet even during those moments, heaven was still working behind the scenes. Some battles were allowed because they were removing people who could not go where God is taking you. Some storms came to break your attachment to temporary things. Some delays existed to protect you from entering doors before your spirit was ready. The chosen path often feels unfair because it is not designed for comfort. It is designed for transformation. Many people see your strength today, but have no idea what it cost you to become this version of yourself. They do not know about the nights you felt emotionally exhausted. They do not know how many times you almost gave up. They do not know how deeply you questioned your purpose, but God knows. Heaven saw every hidden battle you fought when nobody else was watching. And because you continued moving forward, even while wounded, your story is becoming proof that divine strength is real. The enemy attacked you so intensely because your future carries power. Darkness does not waste energy fighting empty souls. The greater the calling, the greater the resistance. There is a reason confusion tried to consume your mind. There is a reason fear kept whispering to you. There is a reason discouragement followed you through certain seasons. Your spirit carries something valuable, and spiritual warfare always surrounds valuable things. But despite all the attacks, you survived. That is not accidental. That is spiritual evidence that God's hand has remained over your life from the beginning. You may not fully realize it yet, but the hardest season of your life created the strongest version of you. The pain forced you to evolve. The heartbreak taught you discernment. The waiting season built patience. The isolation deepened your connection with God. The warfare increased your spiritual awareness. Everything you endured was shaping your soul for the next chapter of your destiny. And now, after everything you survived, heaven is saying something important to you. You made it through. The storm did not destroy you. The betrayal did not finish you. The rejection did not erase your purpose. The attacks did not silence your calling. You are still here because God has not abandoned the plan for your life. In fact, many of the things happening now are signs that your season is beginning to shift. What once felt impossible will soon become evidence of divine restoration. There is a reason your spirit feels different lately, a reason you no longer tolerate certain energies, conversations, or environments, a reason your discernment has become sharper. You are evolving spiritually. You are entering a new level of awareness. The person who began the journey is not the same person listening to this message now. Pain transformed you, but it also purified you. And although the process was brutal, it revealed the strength God placed inside you long before the battle ever started. Today's message is not just motivation, it is confirmation. Confirmation that your struggle had purpose. Confirmation that heaven never lost sight of you. Confirmation that the hardest test was preparing you for an extraordinary assignment. And most importantly, confirmation that God is not finished with your story yet. The hardest battles are given to the strongest souls. Most people misunderstand suffering. They believe pain means failure, abandonment, or punishment. But spiritual truth often works differently from human understanding. Sometimes the greatest evidence that you are chosen is not how easy your life becomes, but how much darkness you survive without losing your soul. The hardest battles are not assigned randomly. Heaven does not place enormous weight on fragile foundations. God only allows certain tests for souls carrying uncommon strength and uncommon purpose. Think about your life for a moment. Look at everything you endured that should have destroyed you emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. There were seasons when you carried pain in silence because nobody around you could truly understand what you were going through. People saw your smile, but not your internal war. They saw you functioning externally while your spirit was exhausted internally. Some days, simply surviving required enormous strength, yet even during your weakest moments, something inside you refused to completely surrender. That hidden resilience was never accidental. It was evidence that God built your spirit differently. Chosen people often experience early hardship because adversity awakens spiritual maturity. Comfort rarely produces deep wisdom. Easy lives rarely create powerful discernment. Many of the lessons shaping your soul today could only be learned through hardship. The betrayal taught you not to depend entirely on human loyalty. The loneliness taught you how to seek God privately. The rejection taught you self-worth beyond external validation. The uncertainty forced you to develop faith even when visible evidence disappeared. Every painful experience carried hidden spiritual training. One of the most difficult parts of being chosen is feeling different from others without fully understanding why. Since childhood, many chosen souls feel disconnected from the world around them. They sense things deeply. They notice energies others ignore. They struggle to fit into environments that feel spiritually heavy. Often, they become targets of misunderstanding, jealousy, or rejection long before they recognize their spiritual identity. This happens because strong spiritual light naturally creates reactions in people who are spiritually conflicted. The enemy frequently attacks chosen people early because destiny leaves spiritual fingerprints long before fulfillment arrives. Even before you understood your purpose, the warfare surrounding your life already recognized your potential. That is why confusion followed you. That is why certain relationships felt draining. That is why periods of intense emotional warfare appeared repeatedly. Darkness often detects spiritual greatness before the person carrying it becomes fully aware. But here is the truth many people never realize. Your survival already proves your strength. The fact that you are still standing after everything you endured means God has sustained you continuously. There were moments you thought you were alone, but heaven was protecting you in ways you could not see. Some disasters were prevented without your knowledge. Some people were removed because they carried hidden danger. Some delays protected your future. Some closed doors prevented destruction, disguised as opportunity. Many chosen people become frustrated because their lives seem harder than others around them. They wonder why they cannot simply enjoy peace without constant battles. But what they fail to understand is that spiritual responsibility creates spiritual resistance. A person carrying great purpose will always experience greater testing. Gold is refined through fire, not comfort. Diamonds are formed under pressure, not ease. Powerful souls are shaped through endurance. Sometimes God allows isolation, because isolation removes distractions. When too many voices surround you, it becomes difficult to hear divine direction clearly. The lonely seasons were painful, but they forced you into spiritual depth. They taught you how to survive emotionally without constant external support. They revealed who truly cared about your soul and who only cared about convenience. Isolation purified your relationships and strengthened your discernment. Another difficult reality of being chosen is that many people will misunderstand your journey. Some will judge your distance without understanding your healing. Some will criticize your boundaries without understanding your battles. Some will envy your strength without realizing the pain that produced it. But chosen people eventually learn that not everyone is assigned to understand their path. Sometimes your journey will only make sense between you and God. The hardest tests often arrive before major transformation. Spiritually, this happens because old versions of you must die before new levels can emerge. Certain mindsets had to break. Certain emotional attachments had to fall apart. Certain fears had to be confronted directly. God was not simply trying to bless you externally. He was transforming you internally. Because external blessings without internal maturity often lead to destruction. There were times you asked God to remove the storm, but instead He strengthened you inside the storm. At the time, this felt confusing and painful, but now you are beginning to understand why. If every obstacle disappeared immediately, you would never discover the strength hidden inside your spirit. Your endurance revealed your spiritual capacity. Your survival revealed your divine protection. Your scars revealed your resilience. One of the greatest lies the enemy tells chosen people is that their suffering means they are forgotten. In reality, many times suffering is evidence that heaven is preparing them for something larger than they currently understand. Preparation rarely feels pleasant. Growth often feels uncomfortable. Transformation frequently feels painful, but every difficult season was building something eternal inside you. And perhaps the most powerful truth of all is this: you survived things that were specifically designed to break you. Think about that carefully. Certain attacks were not random inconveniences. They were strategic attempts to destroy your confidence, your peace, your faith, your identity, and your future. Yet despite all of it, your spirit remains alive. Wounded, perhaps, tired sometimes, but still alive, still fighting, still believing somewhere deep inside that your story is not over. That is why this message matters so much today. Because heaven wants you to understand something clearly. The hardest test was never proof that you were weak. It was proof that your soul was strong enough to survive what would have destroyed others. And now, after everything you endured, God is preparing to reveal why you had to walk through the fire in the first place. God used the pain to transform you into someone unstoppable. One of the deepest truths about the chosen path is that God never wastes pain. Human beings often see suffering as meaningless punishment, but heaven sees it differently. Every difficult season you endured carried a hidden purpose behind it. Every betrayal, every disappointment, every lonely night, every unanswered prayer, every moment when your heart felt shattered into pieces was shaping you into someone far stronger than you were before. At the time, you could not understand it. You only felt exhaustion, confusion, sadness, and spiritual pressure. But now, as you look back, you can begin to see that the person you were before the storm could never have handled the destiny God has prepared for you today. Pain changes people. But for chosen people, pain does something even deeper. It awakens them. It strips away illusions. It exposes false relationships. It reveals hidden intentions. It forces spiritual growth. Before your hardest battles, you may have trusted too easily, depended too much on external validation, or searched for peace in places that could never truly satisfy your soul. But suffering has a way of pulling people closer to truth. When everything external begins falling apart, the spirit starts searching for something eternal to hold on to. That is often when God begins the deepest transformation. Many chosen people spend years asking, "Why did this happen to me?" without realizing that the better question is, what was this pain creating inside me? Because the truth is that your suffering produced qualities that comfort never could have created. The storms developed emotional endurance. The rejection built independence. The heartbreak strengthened discernment. The loneliness deepened spiritual connection. The waiting season taught patience. The uncertainty taught faith. You were not simply surviving hardship. You were being rebuilt from the inside out. There is a version of you that existed before the battle, and there is a version of you emerging after it. They are not the same person. The old version may have been more naive, more trusting, more emotionally dependent on people, more easily manipulated, or more afraid of being alone. But after everything you survived, something changed permanently inside your spirit. You now recognize energies faster. You protect your peace more carefully. You value authenticity over appearances. You no longer chase acceptance the way you once did. The pain forced maturity into your soul. One of the most difficult parts of transformation is that it often requires separation. God sometimes removes people from your life, not because you failed, but because they cannot follow you into your next season. Some relationships were assignments, not permanent connections. Some people entered your life to teach lessons, reveal hidden wounds, or push you toward growth. But when their role ended, the separation became necessary. At first, this felt devastating. You mourned people you thought would stay forever. You questioned why connections suddenly changed. But eventually, you began realizing that some departures were actually protection, disguised as loss. Chosen people often experience painful endings because destiny requires emotional purification. God cannot elevate someone who is still emotionally chained to unhealthy attachments. Sometimes He allows heartbreak because your soul has become attached to people who are draining your energy, delaying your purpose, or distracting you from your calling. The separation hurts because human hearts naturally resist change. But later, with spiritual clarity, you begin understanding why certain doors had to close. Another painful reality is that transformation often feels like destruction while it is happening. When God starts changing your life, He frequently removes comfort zones first. Suddenly, old environments no longer feel right. Conversations that once entertained you now feel empty. Certain friendships begin feeling spiritually heavy. Your tolerance for negativity decreases. Your desire for solitude increases. You start craving peace more than attention. And because this internal shift happens gradually, many chosen people feel confused during the process. They feel disconnected from their old identity without fully understanding who they are becoming yet. This spiritual transition can feel incredibly lonely. People around you may notice the change, but fail to understand it. Some may accuse you of becoming distant, cold, or different, but the truth is that growth changes your spirit permanently. Once your eyes open spiritually, you cannot return to old levels of awareness comfortably. You start recognizing manipulation faster. You notice hidden motives more clearly. Your discernment sharpens. And because your energy changes, your relationships naturally begin shifting too. The pain also taught you something powerful about yourself. You are far stronger than you once believed. Before the battle, you may have doubted your ability to survive certain situations emotionally, But now you look back at things you once thought would completely destroy you, and somehow, despite everything, you survived. Broken perhaps, but alive. Wounded perhaps, but still standing. That realization changes a person deeply. It creates quiet confidence, not arrogance, not pride, but deep inner awareness that if God carried you through those dark seasons, He can carry you through whatever comes next. One reason chosen people become spiritually powerful after suffering is because pain removes illusions about the world. It teaches them not to build their identity entirely around temporary things. Money can disappear, relationships can end, human approval can change overnight, but spiritual identity remains. Through suffering, God teaches chosen souls to anchor themselves in something eternal instead of something unstable. This is why many chosen people eventually become calmer, wiser, and less reactive. They have already survived enough pain to understand that external chaos cannot define internal peace forever. There were moments during your journey when you thought you were losing everything, but in reality, God was removing what no longer aligned with your future. Imagine trying to pour clean water into a cup already filled with poison. The cup must first be emptied. In the same way, certain mindsets, attachments, habits, fears, and relationships had to leave your life before God could fully release the next chapter of your destiny. The emptying process felt painful because humans naturally fear loss. But many of the things you lost were blocking your spiritual growth. The enemy wanted your suffering to make you bitter, but instead, it made you wiser. The enemy wanted isolation to make you hopeless, but instead it deepened your relationship with God. The enemy wanted rejection to destroy your confidence, but instead it forced you to discover your worth without depending on external validation. This is one of the greatest spiritual victories of all, when the very attacks designed to destroy you become the tools God uses to strengthen you. And perhaps the most important transformation pain created inside you is this: you no longer fear hardship the way you once did. Before, uncertainty terrified you, loss terrified you, loneliness terrified you. But after surviving your hardest seasons, you realize something powerful. You can endure far more than you ever imagined. This realization creates spiritual fearlessness. Not because life becomes easy, but because your soul now understands that God can sustain you even through impossible situations. The chosen path was never meant to create weak people. It was meant to create spiritually unshakable souls. Souls capable of carrying light into dark places. Souls capable of surviving betrayal without becoming cruel. Souls capable of enduring loneliness without losing faith. Souls capable of continuing forward even while wounded. Your pain was not random chaos. It was spiritual construction. Heaven was building someone unstoppable. Right now, even if your life still feels uncertain, understand this clearly. You are not the same person who entered the storm. The fire changed you. The battle transformed you. The suffering awakened you. And the version of you emerging now carries a strength, wisdom, discernment, and spiritual depth that could only be created through survival. God allowed the hardest test because He knew your spirit could make it through. And now, after everything you endured, your transformation is becoming undeniable. The enemy attacked you because your future carries great power. One of the hardest truths for chosen people to understand is that not every battle in life is merely physical, emotional, or psychological. Some battles are deeply spiritual. Some attacks appear through people, circumstances, confusion, fear, delays, betrayals, and emotional exhaustion. But beneath all of it, there is often an invisible war happening around your destiny. The reason your life felt unusually difficult at certain moments is because your future carries spiritual weight. There is something inside you that darkness recognized long before you fully recognized it yourself. Most people never experience the level of warfare chosen souls face because most people are not carrying the same kind of assignment. The enemy does not waste energy attacking empty destinies. Intense spiritual resistance often surrounds people whose future has the potential to inspire, heal, awaken, protect, or transform others. That is why your path felt so heavy from the beginning. The attacks were never only about your present circumstances. They were about preventing your future. Think about how many times confusion suddenly entered your life right before an important breakthrough. Think about how many opportunities collapsed at the last second. Think about how many relationships became toxic once you started growing spiritually. Think about how many times fear attacked your mind whenever you got close to stepping into something bigger. These patterns were not always random. Spiritual warfare often intensifies whenever a chosen person approaches transformation, elevation, or purpose. The enemy understands something many chosen people forget during painful seasons. Your survival has power. Your testimony has power. Your healing has power. Your voice has power. Your future has power. And because of that, darkness tries to stop the process before you fully awaken spiritually. This is why many chosen people spend years battling self-doubt, emotional heaviness, confusion, overthinking, and internal fear. The goal of spiritual warfare is often not immediate destruction. It is discouragement. If the enemy can convince you to quit, isolate yourself permanently, distrust your purpose, or lose faith in God, then your potential remains buried. There were seasons when you felt emotionally attacked from every direction. You tried to move forward, but exhaustion followed you constantly. You prayed, but your mind felt heavy. You attempted to stay hopeful, but discouragement kept whispering negative thoughts into your spirit. At times it felt like invisible resistance surrounded your life, no matter how hard you tried to remain positive. This happens to many chosen people because spiritual warfare often targets the mind first. The enemy understands that if your thoughts become controlled by fear, hopelessness, or insecurity, your actions will eventually follow. That is why protecting your spirit became necessary. Over time, you learned that not every environment deserves access to your energy. Not every conversation deserves your attention. Not every person deserves your trust. The attacks forced you to become spiritually aware. They forced you to sharpen your discernment. Pain taught you how to recognize energies that drain your soul. The warfare awakened instincts inside you that comfort never could have developed. Many chosen people also notice a strange pattern throughout life. People either feel deeply drawn to them or strangely uncomfortable around them. This happens because spiritual energy affects people differently. Souls carrying strong spiritual light often unconsciously expose hidden insecurity, jealousy, darkness, or unresolved pain in others. Some people feel peace around chosen souls. Others feel threatened without understanding why. This is why you may have experienced sudden rejection, envy, misunderstanding, or hostility, even when your intentions were pure. Your presence activated things inside people that had nothing to do with you personally. The enemy often uses wounded people to attack chosen individuals emotionally. Sometimes betrayal came from people you trusted deeply. Sometimes criticism came from those closest to you. Sometimes manipulation disguised itself as love. These experiences were painful, not only because of the betrayal itself, but because they created emotional scars that affected your ability to trust again. The enemy knows that wounded hearts become guarded hearts, and guarded hearts sometimes struggle to receive the blessings God wants to send later. But here is what darkness did not expect. Instead of completely destroying you, the attacks made you spiritually stronger. Every betrayal increased your discernment. Every disappointment deepened your connection with God. Every lonely season strengthened your independence. Every attack sharpened your awareness. What was meant to weaken you ended up training you spiritually. One reason chosen people eventually become powerful is because they learn how to survive emotional warfare without losing their soul completely. Anyone can remain kind when life feels easy. Anyone can remain hopeful when everything goes according to plan. But surviving intense pain without becoming completely consumed by bitterness requires spiritual strength. The fact that your heart still desires peace after everything you survived is proof that God preserved something sacred inside you. The enemy also attacked your identity because identity determines destiny. If you forget who you are spiritually, you start settling for less than what God intended for your life. This is why so many attacks focused on making you feel worthless, forgotten, unloved, weak, or unimportant. The goal was to disconnect you from your true spiritual identity, because once a chosen person fully realizes their worth, their spiritual authority begins increasing dramatically. There were moments when you almost believed the lies, moments when the pain felt endless, moments when you questioned your purpose entirely, moments when exhaustion made you wonder whether continuing was even worth it. But even during your darkest seasons, something inside your spirit refused to die completely. That hidden strength was God sustaining you quietly behind the scenes. Sometimes heaven allows warfare because warfare reveals spiritual authority. Before the battle, you may not have fully understood the strength hidden inside you, but survival awakened it. The attacks forced you to develop resilience. They forced you to pray differently. They forced you to rely on God in deeper ways. They forced you to become emotionally stronger. In many ways, the warfare introduced you to your true spiritual capacity. One of the enemy's greatest frustrations is when a chosen person finally realizes that the attacks were actually confirmation of purpose. Suddenly, the suffering begins making sense differently. You stop seeing yourself as cursed and start recognizing that your spirit was carrying something valuable all along. This changes your mindset completely. Instead of asking, "Why is life always attacking me?" you begin understanding there must be something powerful inside me worth fighting against. And the truth is, there is. Your future carries influence you cannot fully see yet. There are people your story will inspire someday. There are broken souls your survival will encourage. There are lives your wisdom will help heal. There are doors God will open that once seemed impossible. The enemy attacked you early because darkness tries to stop dangerous light before it reaches its full potential. But despite every attack, every betrayal, every setback, every delay, every lonely night and every emotional battle, you are still here. Read that again carefully. You are still here. The warfare did not erase your destiny. The attacks did not cancel God's plan. The enemy may have slowed certain things temporarily, but heaven never abandoned your future. In fact, many chosen people discover something incredible after surviving intense spiritual warfare. The very battles that almost destroyed them become the source of their power later. Your pain creates empathy. Your survival creates wisdom. Your scars create discernment. Your endurance creates authority. The darkness that fought against you unintentionally trained you for the next level of your spiritual journey. That is why your spirit feels different now. Stronger, wiser, more aware, less naive, more protective of peace, more sensitive to energy, more connected to God. The attacks changed you, but they did not defeat you. Instead, they revealed the strength heaven placed inside you long before the battle ever began. And now the enemy is beginning to realize something terrifying. The chosen one they tried to break is becoming stronger because of everything they survived. Your isolation was not rejection, it was divine preparation. One of the most painful experiences chosen people endure is isolation. Not ordinary loneliness, but deep, soul-level separation. The kind that makes you feel disconnected even when surrounded by people. The kind that slowly removes relationships, environments, habits, and versions of yourself until you barely recognize your own life anymore. There were seasons when you wondered why everyone seemed to drift away from you, why friendships suddenly changed, why certain people stopped understanding you, why you felt emotionally distant from environments that once felt familiar. At times it felt like rejection. At times it felt like abandonment. But what if heaven was using isolation for something much greater than you realized? The truth is that chosen people are often separated before they are elevated. God removes distractions before revealing deeper purpose. Isolation is not always punishment. Sometimes it is protection, sometimes it is preparation. Sometimes heaven pulls you away from noise because your spirit can no longer grow properly in environments that are spiritually draining. The problem is that during the process, isolation feels incredibly painful because human beings naturally crave connection, understanding, and emotional comfort. Many chosen souls experience periods where they feel like outsiders in their own lives. Conversations begin feeling empty. Certain social circles become exhausting. You start noticing energies that once went completely ignored. Loud environments suddenly feel spiritually heavy. Fake relationships become unbearable. Your tolerance for negativity decreases. You crave peace more than attention. Solitude becomes more comforting than forced connection. And because this transformation happens gradually, it can feel confusing. You may even wonder if something is wrong with you, but nothing is wrong with you. Your spirit is evolving. When God begins preparing someone for higher levels of purpose, He often changes their environment first. Why? Because environments influence identity. The wrong atmosphere can suffocate spiritual growth. The wrong people can delay destiny. The wrong attachments can weaken discernment. Many chosen people remain spiritually stuck for years because they are surrounded by constant distraction, emotional chaos, toxic relationships, or environments that keep them spiritually asleep. Isolation becomes necessary because God is trying to awaken the soul fully. One reason isolation feels so painful is because it exposes wounds that distraction once covered. When people are constantly surrounded by noise, entertainment, attention, or relationships, they can temporarily avoid confronting deeper emotional pain. But in isolation, there is nowhere to hide from yourself anymore. Suddenly, old wounds surface. Childhood pain resurfaces. Fear appears. Insecurity rises. Unhealed trauma becomes visible. At first, this process feels overwhelming, but spiritual healing often begins with painful honesty. There were moments during your isolation when you probably questioned your worth. You wondered why certain people left your life so easily. You replayed conversations in your mind, trying to understand what went wrong. You asked yourself why connections that once felt strong suddenly disappeared. But with time, clarity begins arriving. You start realizing that some people were only connected to older versions of you. Once your spirit began evolving, the connection naturally weakened because your energy no longer aligned. Not everyone assigned to your past can follow you into your future. This is one of the hardest lessons chosen people learn. Some relationships exist only for certain chapters. Some people love the version of you that needed validation, tolerated disrespect, ignored red flags, or stayed spiritually asleep. But once healing begins, your standards change. Your discernment sharpens. Your spirit becomes less willing to accept emotional manipulation or shallow connection. And because of that, separation becomes inevitable. God sometimes isolates chosen people because their voice becomes clearer in silence. During noisy seasons, you may have depended too heavily on outside opinions. You sought validation from people instead of seeking direction from God. You allowed external voices to influence your identity too strongly. But isolation teaches something powerful. When everything external becomes quiet, the spirit finally learns how to hear divine guidance more clearly. This is why many chosen people experience spiritual awakening during lonely seasons. When distractions disappear, sensitivity increases. You begin noticing patterns differently. You start understanding people more clearly. Your intuition strengthens. Your discernment sharpens. You begin recognizing which environments drain your soul and which ones bring peace. Isolation increases spiritual awareness because it removes constant interference. The enemy often tries to convince chosen people that isolation means they are unloved, forgotten, or unwanted. But many times, isolation is actually evidence that God is doing deep internal work. Think about how seeds grow underground before becoming visible. During that hidden process, nothing appears to be happening externally, but internally, transformation is already taking place. In the same way, your isolated seasons were not empty seasons. They were hidden seasons of preparation. Some of the greatest growth in your life happened privately. Nobody saw the nights you cried silently. Nobody saw the internal battles you fought. Nobody saw how many times you rebuilt yourself emotionally after disappointment. Nobody saw how much spiritual strength you developed simply by surviving days that felt unbearably heavy. But heaven saw everything, and every lonely season was building emotional endurance inside your spirit. Another reason God allows isolation is because chosen people must learn not to depend entirely on human presence for peace. This does not mean relationships are bad. It means your identity cannot be built completely around external connection. Human beings are temporary. People change, relationships shift, but God remains constant. Isolation teaches chosen souls how to stand emotionally, even when external support disappears. There is also another hidden truth about isolation. It reveals who genuinely cares about your soul. During easy seasons, many people remain close because convenience requires nothing from them. But during painful seasons, masks fall. Some disappear completely. Some become distant. Some reveal hidden motives. Isolation exposes the difference between real connection and temporary attachment. Pain reveals loyalty more clearly than comfort ever could. At first, this realization hurts deeply. You grieve the loss of people you thought would stay forever. But eventually, wisdom arrives. You realize that not every separation was a tragedy. Some departures were necessary. Some people had to leave because their presence was blocking your growth. Some connections ended because God was protecting your peace. Some relationships dissolved because your future required different energy around you. Chosen people often feel isolated because their spirit naturally begins separating from lower vibrations as they grow spiritually. You cannot evolve while constantly remaining attached to environments that destroy your peace. Healing changes your tolerance. Awakening changes your perspective. Spiritual growth changes your energy permanently. And because of that, your circle naturally becomes smaller. But smaller does not mean worse. In fact, many chosen people discover that peace grows when unnecessary noise disappears. The silence that once felt painful eventually becomes sacred. You begin enjoying your own energy more. You become more emotionally stable. You stop chasing approval. You stop forcing connections. You stop begging people to understand your worth. Instead, you develop quiet confidence rooted in spiritual awareness. One of the most beautiful things about divine isolation is that it teaches self-discovery. Before the separation, you may have spent years adapting yourself to fit others. You adjusted your personality to avoid rejection. You silenced parts of yourself to maintain connection. You tolerated situations that drained your spirit because you feared loneliness. But isolation forces authenticity. Eventually, you stop pretending. You stop shrinking yourself emotionally. You stop abandoning your own peace just to keep people comfortable. And during this process, something incredible happens. You begin finding yourself again, not the version shaped by fear, not the version addicted to validation, not the version constantly chasing acceptance, but the real version, the stronger version, the wiser version, the spiritually awakened version God was shaping beneath all the pain. Yes, isolation hurt you deeply. There were nights it felt unbearable. There were moments you questioned everything, but now you are beginning to understand something powerful. The isolation was not meant to destroy you. It was meant to prepare you. God pulled you away from certain people because your destiny required spiritual clarity. Heaven removed distractions because your spirit needed healing. The lonely season was not evidence of abandonment. It was evidence of transformation. And now, after everything you survived privately, you are becoming someone emotionally stronger, spiritually wiser, and internally unshakable. The isolation changed you forever, but instead of breaking your spirit, it awakened your true identity. After the hardest test, God begins revealing the reward. There comes a moment in every chosen person's journey when the pain finally begins making sense. Not all at once, not instantly, but slowly, like the sunrise after a long night, clarity starts appearing. The storms that once felt meaningless begin revealing hidden purpose. The betrayals reveal lessons. The delays reveal protection. The isolation reveals transformation. And the suffering that almost destroyed you begins uncovering the strength God was building inside you all along. This is the moment many chosen souls are approaching now. After surviving the hardest test, heaven begins preparing the next chapter. Revelation, restoration, elevation, and fulfillment. One of the greatest misconceptions people have about divine timing is believing that God moves according to human urgency. Human beings want immediate answers, immediate healing, immediate breakthroughs, immediate justice. But heaven often works through preparation before manifestation. Why? Because blessings received before emotional and spiritual maturity can become destruction instead of elevation. God was never only trying to give you something externally, He was trying to transform you internally so you could sustain the future He planned for you. If certain blessings had arrived years ago, you may not have been emotionally ready for them. You may have trusted the wrong people. You may have sabotaged opportunities through fear or insecurity. You may have lacked discernment. You may have depended too heavily on external validation. But now, after everything you survived, your spirit is different, stronger, wiser, more aware, more disciplined emotionally, more connected to God. The hardship created the foundation necessary for the next level of your life. There is a reason you feel change approaching, a reason your spirit no longer resonates with your old life the same way, a reason certain doors are quietly closing while new energy slowly enters your path. Chosen people often sense transition spiritually before they see it physically. Something inside you knows the old chapter is ending. You may not fully understand what is coming yet, but your soul can feel movement happening beneath the surface. The reward after spiritual testing is not always material at first. Sometimes the first reward is peace, deep peace, the kind you never had before. After years of emotional warfare, inner calm begins returning. The mind becomes quieter. Fear loses its grip. Anxiety weakens. You stop obsessing over people who walked away. You stop replaying old pain constantly. You stop needing to prove yourself to everyone. This inner peace is one of the greatest signs that healing has begun. Many chosen people mistakenly think the reward must immediately appear as money, success, relationships, or visible elevation. But often God first restores the soul, because a healed spirit attracts different energy. A healed spirit makes wiser decisions. A healed spirit recognizes opportunities more clearly. Internal restoration always comes before lasting external transformation. Another sign that your season is changing is that your discernment becomes sharper than ever before. Things you once tolerated now disturb your spirit immediately. You recognize manipulation faster. You notice hidden intentions sooner. Your intuition strengthens. Your energy becomes more protective. This is not paranoia. It is wisdom developed through survival. The pain trained your spirit to recognize what aligns with your peace and what threatens it. One beautiful truth many chosen people discover after hardship is this: the things they once begged God for often become less important after spiritual growth. Why? Because suffering changes priorities. Before the storm, you may have wanted attention, validation, popularity, or certain relationships desperately. But after surviving deep pain, your soul begins craving peace, authenticity, emotional safety, spiritual depth, and genuine connection instead. The battle purified your desires. There is also something powerful about surviving the hardest season of your life. Fear begins losing control over you. Before, uncertainty terrified you, rejection terrified you, loneliness terrified you, failure terrified you. But after everything you endured, you realize something life-changing. If God carried you through that darkness, He can carry you through anything. This realization creates quiet confidence, not loud arrogance, not pride, but deep spiritual stability. You start understanding that your life is not controlled entirely by human circumstances. Divine protection has been surrounding you even during seasons when you felt abandoned. Looking back, you now recognize moments where heaven protected you without your awareness. Some relationships ended because they carried hidden danger. Some opportunities collapsed because they would have delayed your purpose. Some prayers went unanswered because God saw consequences you could not yet see. At the time, you called it disappointment. Later, you call it protection. One of the most emotional moments for chosen people is when they finally realize they survived things specifically designed to destroy them. There were attacks meant to break your faith permanently. There were betrayals meant to harden your heart forever. There were losses meant to make you hopeless. There were delays meant to make you quit. Yet despite everything, your spirit survived. Wounded, yes. Scarred, yes. Exhausted at times, yes. But still alive, still breathing, still carrying purpose. And because you survived, your story now carries power. There are people who will one day find strength because of what you endured. Your survival will inspire others who feel broken. Your wisdom will help people navigating darkness. Your healing will remind wounded souls that restoration is possible. This is one reason chosen people suffer deeply, because their future testimony will eventually become medicine for others. The enemy tried to convince you that your suffering was meaningless. But heaven was writing a story far bigger than you realized. Another powerful shift happens after the hardest test. You stop chasing things that are not aligned with your spirit. Desperation disappears. Forced relationships lose attraction. You become less interested in superficial approval. Why? Because suffering taught you the value of authenticity. After surviving emotional warfare, fake energy becomes exhausting. Your spirit naturally starts protecting itself from anything that threatens peace. You also begin realizing your worth differently. Before the battle, rejection may have damaged your self-esteem deeply. But now you understand something important. Not everyone who leaves your life is rejecting your value. Some people simply cannot align with your destiny. Some people are intimidated by your growth. Some people are attached to older versions of you that no longer exist. And some people are removed because God knows they cannot accompany you into the next season safely. This understanding changes everything emotionally. Instead of constantly asking, "Why did they leave?" you begin asking, "What was God protecting me from?" That shift creates healing. The chosen path eventually teaches something beautiful about divine timing. God may seem late from a human perspective, but he is never careless. Every delay carried hidden purpose. Every closed door carried hidden wisdom. Every painful season carried hidden preparation. And now, after surviving the hardest test, many things are beginning to align differently because your spirit is finally prepared for them. Perhaps the greatest reward of all is becoming who you were always meant to be. Not the fearful version, not the insecure version, not the emotionally dependent version, not the spiritually asleep version, but the awakened version, the wiser version, the stronger version, the version forged through fire and sustained by God through impossible seasons. You may still have battles ahead. Life will never become completely free from difficulty, but you are no longer the same person who entered the storm. The hardest test changed your spirit permanently. You now carry wisdom pain created, discernment survival developed, strength suffering revealed, peace isolation taught, faith endurance built. And heaven wants you to remember something today above all else. The fact that you survived proves that God never abandoned you. Even during your darkest nights, He was still guiding your path quietly. Even during seasons when you felt forgotten, heaven was still preparing your future. Even when the enemy tried to convince you that your story was over, God was still writing new chapters. The hardest test was never meant to destroy the chosen one. It was meant to reveal them.